Hey guys, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be going over interwar tanks and interwar shenanigans. In World War One, the first tank had its baptism of fire, that being the British Mark I tank. The first modern tank, in I guess relative terms, it was the FT-17, or the French FT-17, which was introduced in 1917, also in World War One. It saw combat in World War One. I don't think there was too many made in World War One though, because it came in 1917. It is referred to modern tank because it shares a fully rotating turret and a standard crew layout, being the driver in the front and the engine in the back, and the two crew in the turret, being the commander and the gunner. In these two-man turret tanks, the commander also served as the loader, which meant more stress on him. So later in tank development in general, there was mostly three-man turrets, but that's not very relevant for this video because not too many interwar tanks had three-man turrets, or none that we're going to be going over today at least. But yeah, so it's not really relevant. I just wanted to add that. In the post-World War I period, most countries were on a level playing field in terms of armor development because it was a new technology and no one really had a one-up other than the British and the French, I guess, because they were the first ones that really had tanks. The Germans had not very good tanks, that being the A7V, but there was like 20 of those made, so, not the best. Another group of tanks you can't ignore from the interwar period is the horrible French tanks, because they sucked. Like, they really sucked. Like the S-35 and the R-35, and most importantly, the FMC-36. Most of these tanks were extremely underfunded with their development, with the exception of the B-1 BIS, which was actually pretty good. But most of these tanks performed terribly against the German tanks in World War II because obviously France didn't last too long in World War II, so they didn't have too much time to build new tanks, so they're using pretty much entirely interwar tanks. But some of the chassis of these tanks actually made it into the later war, with them being captured by Germany and pressed into German service. Now on to Germany. So you see, Germany wasn't really able to make tanks in most of the interwar period until the late interwar period, where they just didn't care because of silly mustache man. But they had some tanks like the Gross Tractor and other occasional prototypes. All these prototypes would accumulate into the Panzer series, which is on my channel. Go watch it and educate yourself further. And there's a link to the playlist up in the top right, I think, right now. So click on it, please. I need views. Now, like I said, the British, Vickers is from Britain, so Vickers built their tanks in Britain, and they exported them. They were like an exporting tank company, and not too many Vickers tanks have really went into British service, even though most of them were not bad. But that's mostly irrelevant for this video. British tanks, like domestic British tanks, were not very good, to say the least, in the interwar period. Some of the best that they came out with which was even towards the later part of the interwar period, was the Matilda series. The Matilda 1 wasn't very good, but the Matilda 2, it was pretty good. It was like a British KV-1 kinda, you know what I mean. But they also had the Cruiser series of tanks, which were not good, but they were better than the Medium Mark III. It's just, but yeah, a lot of Britain's developments in that period were really just World War One tanks that they slapped stuff onto. Like, they had a few decent light tanks, like the Patriarch. Now on to Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia and some of the other countries around there is pretty much most of the reason that I made this video, or that I am making this video. Czechoslovakia was quite a light tank making powerhouse in the early 30s compared to some of the other smaller minor nations in Europe. Most of their tanks were built by the CKD, which has a longer name that I'm not going to attempt to say because I've butchered many things on this channel and I don't want to butcher more. But like I said, the CKD made many tanks like the LT-35 and the LT-38, which those were eventually put into the German army as the Panzer 38T and the Panzer 35T. I did that backwards, but you get the point. There's many other tanks that they prototyped and saw even limited service from like limited production runs and stuff like that. But there's the LT-35 and LT-38 was probably the most important ones that they made in that period because of their extensive use in World War II. Next up, we have the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union's tank force really consisted of T-26s and BTs after their introduction in 1931 and 32, respectively. We already went over T-26s. They're pretty much just Vickers 6 tons, but rebranded Soviet. But the BT tanks are really where it's at. The BT tanks, there was 3 different ones. There's a BT-2, which was the first one, obviously. There's a BT-5, and then the BT-7. The BT-7 served until 1945 as a light tank, because most of the other light tanks that Soviet Union made, they seem to suck. I'm looking at UT-70, but the BT means fast-moving tank or high-speed tank. They were originally made by J. Walter Christie for the American Army, but they had to be shipped over, or the Americans didn't really want them, so they were shipped over to the Soviet Union as tractors, I think. Yeah, tractors, or farming tractors. So, without their guns and stuff on them. So then they put the guns on them and tried them out, and they liked them. So they built 8,000 of them. Yeah, so they built quite a lot of these things, and it made up pretty much all of the Soviet tank force, other than the T-26s. Not sure how many of those were made, but there was a few other gross little rat tanks that the Soviet Union made, like the T-27, which was a disgusting little tankette. Which, another thing with the interwar period, tankettes were really big because they're so cheap and easy to produce. And we're out of time. So what I'll do is I might make a part 2 after the mouse video. Sorry for no video last weekend. I was pretty busy. So, but as always, thank you guys for watching. Subscribe, join the Discord, and thank you for enjoying this video and watching to the end. See you guys next week with another addition to the Panzer series. Also, don't forget to join the Discord in the link in the description. The Christie suspension is the answer to everything.